The Lakeview Banquet Hall on the outskirts of Columbus shimmered under soft golden light. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, reflecting off champagne flutes, elegant evening gowns, and timeless black tuxedos. The scent of bourbon mingled with hints of vanilla from the decorative candles, while classic jazz played gently in the background. This was my engagement party. It was supposed to be the pinnacle of my life. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 28 years old, an investment associate at Golden Crest Fund Management in Columbus, Ohio. The Walker family, my adoptive family, is one of the most prominent names in the region. They run Walker Properties, a vast commercial real estate empire with malls and luxury hotels across Ohio. I grew up in their grand estate atop Westfield Hill, amidst opulent parties and ski trips to Colorado, a life that seemed perfect on the surface. And yet, there was always a lingering feeling I could never fully explain, a sense of being just outside the gates, looking in through thick glass, accepted but never quite belonging. As a child, I occasionally asked my adoptive father, Richard, about my birth mother. He would always gently dodge the question, "You are God's miraculous gift to me, Ethan. That's what matters most." Eventually, I stopped asking. Life was good enough that I convinced myself I didn't need the answers. Until tonight, Claire, my fiancée, flashed me a radiant smile. She wore a floor-length emerald gown, her chestnut hair pinned elegantly beneath the shimmering lights. Over the past months, Claire had been my sanctuary from the suffocating expectations of the Walker family. I squeezed her hand gently, grounding myself in the moment. And then I saw Uncle Randy. He stood by the bar, bourbon swirling in his glass. His beer belly stretched against his outdated tuxedo. His face flushed. Randy was Richard's younger brother, arrogant, crude, always eager to stir discomfort at family gatherings with his venomous jokes. "Already drunk," Claire whispered nervously. "Let's hope he doesn't cause trouble tonight." I nodded, trying to ignore him. But Randy's voice cut through the room, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, well, a grand engagement party for the Walker family's perfect son. He stared directly at me, his twisted smile dripping with malice. Quite the miracle, isn't it? From some kid with no clue where he came from, to becoming the heir to the Walker legacy. His words detonated like a bomb in the middle of the room. Heads turned, my entire body tensed. "What are you talking about, Randy?" I forced my voice to stay calm, though my heart hammered in my chest. Randy snorted, his voice raspy from the alcohol. "Oh, your dear father never told you you really think you're a true Walker." He narrowed his eyes, voice laced with spite. "Why don't you go ask your dad where you really came from?" Claire gripped my hand tighter, stepping back, her face drained of color. "Enough! Randy!" My father's voice thundered from behind. Richard stormed over, face flushed with tension. "That's enough." But the damage was done. No one spoke. The entire room froze. The jazz music now felt unnervingly sharp. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, curious, shocked, whispering. My mind spun. I'm not really a Walker. Who am I? What has my father hidden from me for 28 years? Who was my real mother? And, if I don't belong to this family, why my vision blurred? Claire hesitated, releasing my hand, her gaze flickering between fear, pity, and doubt. I turned and all but bolted from the hall. The outside air was bitterly cold, unusual for April. Wind from the lake cut through my expensive suit. I stood alone in the empty parking lot, staring up at the black sky. Behind me, I heard rushed footsteps. Claire caught up, wrapping her arms around me from behind, her voice trembling. "Ethan, I don't care about any of that. But are you okay? Is it true? Are you really not a Walker by blood?" My jaw clenched, my eyes burning. I wanted to answer, but I had just learned that truth mere minutes ago. I croaked, my voice hoarse. I don't know. Claire. But I have to find out. And I knew then this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. My mind spun endlessly inside my quiet penthouse overlooking the Scioto River. The city lights of Columbus glimmered softly like always, but all I could see were jumbled fragments of thought. Randy's venomous words echoed on repeat in my head like a haunting refrain. Why don't you go ask your dad where you really came from? I had always seen my adoptive father, Richard Walker, as the ideal man. He sent me to prestigious private schools in Upper Arlington, funded my degree at Miami University of Ohio, taught me business principles, and helped me build my career. To my friends, I was the perfect golden boy. But the man I trusted most had hidden something so monumental from me for 28 years. By 8 in the morning, I knew I had to confront him. The Walker estate sat perched atop familiar Westfield Hill, the red brick mansion with its arched iron gates and tall rows of maple trees. I drove up the long incline slowly, my heart pounding. My father was sitting on the porch, coffee cup in hand, dark circles under his eyes. The untouched morning paper sat beside him. It seemed he hadn't slept either. "Dad!" My voice broke the stillness before he could react. He looked up, lips pressed tight as though he'd been expecting me. "Come inside, son." We sat facing each other in the grand living room. Morning light streamed through the tall windows, casting a glow on the massive Walker family portrait hanging above the fireplace, a portrait I had always seen as a symbol of belonging. Now, it felt like mockery. I got straight to the point. There was no room for evasion. Was Randy telling the truth? I'm not really your biological son. Am I? He stayed silent for a long time. His hand trembled slightly, spilling coffee onto the polished table. Finally, he exhaled. "Ethan, this is something you were never supposed to know." His words sliced deeper. I clenched my fists, struggling to contain my anger. "You've hidden this from me all these years. I have a right to know who I am." He closed his eyes, voice lowering. "Yes, you were adopted when you were just a few days old. Your birth mother, she couldn't raise you at the time." "Why?" I blurted out, almost involuntarily. He averted his gaze. The heavy silence dragged on. "It was complicated, Ethan. There are things that would only hurt you if you knew them too soon. I just wanted to protect you." "Then tell me the truth. Who is my birth mother? Where is she now?" He sighed deeply, his eyes welling up a rare sight from this usually stoic man. "She lived here once. But after giving birth, she left town. I don't know where she is anymore." My jaw tightened. A storm of emotions tangled inside me. Shock, pain, anger, and above all, betrayal. I had trusted him like a real father, and yet he had kept this secret for 28 years. "What about my biological father?" I asked, my voice breaking. This time, he shook his head slowly, eyes reddening. "I don't know. Your mother gave birth alone. No father's name ever appeared on your birth certificate." His words sounded sincere. But in that moment, I wasn't sure I could trust anyone. Then why does Randy know? Why did he humiliate me in front of everyone? For the first time. My father's jaw clenched hard. "Randy knows bits and pieces from back then, but he doesn't know everything. And he's always resented how much I gave you. Ethan, don't let his poisonous words destroy you." But I couldn't shake them off. I stood up, my voice icy. "I need the truth. All of it, even the part you're trying to hide." His eyes were full of sorrow, almost pleading. "Sometimes, not knowing is better. Ethan." I clenched my fists, fighting back tears. "No, Dad, for me. Knowing the truth is better than living a lie." I turned and walked away. For the first time in years, the Walker house, once my unshakable sanctuary, felt cold and hollow, like a mausoleum. My steps felt heavier as I left, but in my mind, A plan was already forming. If my father wouldn't give me answers, I would find them myself, no matter how painful the truth might be. 2 weeks had passed since the disastrous engagement party. I hadn't returned to the Walker estate. I hadn't even seen Claire. She'd sent a few worried messages, but I didn't know how to respond. My mind was consumed by one single mission, finding out who my birth mother was. Tracking down adoption records from 28 years ago wasn't easy. Ohio's confidentiality laws on closed adoptions are strict, especially in cases where the father's name is missing. After several dead ends at the Franklin County Courthouse, I was nearly at a standstill. Thankfully, I had Ben Harper, my best friend from college. He now worked as a freelance journalist for the Columbus Gazette. He wasn't wealthy like me, but when it came to digging for information, Ben was the best bloodhound I knew. The moment I told him my story, his eyes lit up like he'd just sniffed out the makings of a major scandal. "Ethan," Ben said as we sat in a small cafe in Short North, "I still have a few old sources in the hospital records department, but you need to brace yourself. Stuff buried this long tends to be nastier than you think." I nodded, voice steely. "I don't care how ugly it gets. I need the truth." 3 days later, Ben called. "I got a name," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "Linda Parker, 26 years ago, she gave birth to a baby boy at Riverside Methodist Hospital. The child was placed for adoption immediately after. No father listed, no known relatives." The name hit me like a jolt, Linda Parker. Ben continued. "She used to live here, but after the birth, she left town. No current address in the records, but I managed to trace her last known address in Madison County. I think I know how to find her." My heart pounded. For the first time, I had a real lead. 3 days after that, we stood in front of a small wooden house on the outskirts of London, Ohio, about a 40-minute drive from Columbus. The scene was a stark contrast to everything I knew. From the Walker world, no chandeliers, no grand iron gates, just a simple white fence and a yard scattered with dry leaves. Ben patted my shoulder. "You ready?" I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Yeah, there's no turning back now." We knocked. About half a minute later, the door creaked open. A petite woman in her late 40s stood before us, her brown hair streaked with silver and pinned neatly. Her pale blue eyes widened as she saw me. I spoke first, trying to steady my voice. "Are you Linda Parker?" She froze for a moment, then quickly shook her head. "No, you've got the wrong person." I stepped forward, my gaze cutting into her. "You're my mother, aren't you?" She stiffened, her lips trembling. A flicker of panic crossed her eyes, but almost instantly, she stepped back and started to close the door. "I don't know what you're talking about. Please leave." The door slammed shut. The cold click of the lock echoed like a gunshot. I stood frozen, my heart aching. My entire life, I had yearned to find my mother, and now she stood right before me, only to shut me out like I was a stranger. Ben rested a hand on my shoulder, trying to comfort me. She might be scared, or forced to stay silent. "But Ethan, she recognized you." "She definitely did." I clenched my jaw, breathing heavily. Why is she so terrified? Who or what is making her shake like that? We stood in silence, staring at the door for a few more moments, then quietly made our way back. But I knew Linda was hiding something, and I wouldn't stop until she told me. That night, I sat staring at the Walker family portrait in my apartment, a Christmas photo from last year. My adoptive father, Grandma Walker, Uncle Randy, a few cousins, all smiling brightly. I suddenly recalled something I had always overlooked every time I brought up my birth mother. Grandma would evade the topic awkwardly. Sometimes she would even burst into tears and quickly change the subject. There was something deeper, darker. This wasn't just about adoption. I sank into my chair, filled with burning resolve. If Linda wouldn't talk, I would dig until I unearthed everything. No matter who in that powerful family I had to expose. The next morning, I woke up with the unsettling feeling that someone was watching me. There was no one there, just the early sunlight filtering through the curtains onto my bed. But the unease lingered, like an invisible scent that filled my apartment. I brewed coffee, opened my laptop, and started combing through everything Ben had dug up: old hospital records from Riverside, scattered notes from civil lawsuits in Madison County, lists of board members who had served at the hospital during the 1990s. The leads were thin. It was as if someone had deliberately scrubbed everything clean. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Ben. "Something happened. Ethan." His voice was tense. "What is it?" "Last night, someone broke into the Gazette's office. The security cameras were offline for 2 hours. Luckily, I had already brought all the documents home." He paused, lowering his voice. "We're dealing with something bigger than we thought." A cold chill ran down my spine. Someone was watching us. And they didn't want the truth to surface. Ben continued. "But I did find a new lead. One of the nurses from back then, Carol Jenkins. She retired in 2010 and now lives in the southern suburbs of Columbus. She might know more than any file can tell us. Let's meet her. Now." Carol's home was a modest little house on a quiet street lined with towering trees. She greeted us cautiously when I introduced myself. "Walker." She repeated my last name, her eyes briefly confused before she quickly looked away. I don't know how I can help." I locked eyes with her. "You were the night shift nurse at Riverside Methodist in March 1997. You were there when Linda Parker gave birth. That child was me." Her hands trembled slightly. The name Linda Parker clearly awakened something deep in her memory. Why dig up the past after all these years? Some things are better left alone. I swallowed the lump in my throat, my voice breaking. "Do you know what it feels like to live your whole life under a lie? I just want to know who my mother is and what happened to her." She sat silently for a long moment. The tension was so heavy I could hear the ticking of the wall clock. Finally, she sighed, her shaky hands smoothing the edge of her thin wool dress. "Linda. She was a sweet girl. She was only 19 when she came in, pregnant, with no family accompanying her, only an older man who claimed to be her cousin." My heart pounded. I glanced at Ben, who frowned. Carol continued. "After the delivery, she was trembling for hours, terrified. I remember her repeating, 'I don't want him to find this baby,' but she never said who he was." I clenched my fist, feeling the pain shoot up my arm. "Did you have any idea who he might be?" She shook her head. "At the time, I suspected it was some kind of inappropriate relationship. But when certain records were adjusted right after the birth, I started to suspect more." "Adjusted," Ben cut in. "Yes." Her eyes darkened. "A few days after Linda was discharged, the hospital's legal department asked me to sign a statement confirming no medical irregularities occurred. A week later, Linda vanished from town. The birth file was sealed as confidential. I knew something was wrong, but no one dared question it. A weight pressed hard against my chest. "Do you know who orchestrated the cover-up?" I asked, my voice barely holding steady. For the first time, Carol glanced around nervously, as if afraid someone might be listening. Then she whispered, "The Walker family. They held significant influence over the hospital board back then, especially Randy Walker. He was very close with the former medical director." Goosebumps prickled my skin. My entire body felt strangled. The very family I grew up in, that despicable uncle, they were involved in this back in the car. I still couldn't fully process what I had just learned. Ben gripped the steering wheel tightly, trying to stay composed. "Ethan, you realize what this means. This isn't just a simple adoption story. Someone powerful wanted Linda silenced, and I guarantee you Randy knows a lot more than he let on that night." I gasped, leaning back into the seat. I still had 1,000 unanswered questions. But one thing was certain, I was digging into something far darker than I had ever imagined. Linda was terrified for a reason, and clearly, someone was still trying to stop me from digging any deeper. I never imagined I'd find myself sitting with Ben in the dim back room of a private investigator's office in northern Columbus. The man was Walter Briggs, a veteran investigator with a gleaming bald head and razor-sharp eyes. Ben knew him from years ago, when he was covering some financial scandals for the Gazette. Briggs was the kind of man who dug into things the police and mainstream press didn't dare touch. "You sure about this?" Briggs asked, peering at me through thick glasses, slowly swirling his coffee. "I need the truth, however ugly it is." Briggs nodded, pulling out a slim file and placing it on the table. Linda Parker, born 1978, poor working-class family from Madison County, dropped out of school, started waitressing at 16 at Walker Diner owned by your family. He gave me a piercing look. And here's where it gets interesting. He flipped to the next page. A faded photograph appeared. Linda, young and tense, wearing a red diner uniform, standing behind the counter, forcing a smile. In the blurred background stood a group of young men laughing, including Randy Walker, then in his early 20s. Linda worked for Randy. That's where the relationship started. My heart pounded, my whole body stiffened. Briggs went on. By late 1996, Linda became pregnant. She claimed she didn't know who the father was. But, he paused, pulling out another envelope. I found a police report that had been quietly buried in December of that year. I leaned in, my chest tightening. Police report, gang rape, allegation. Victim, Linda Parker. 19 suspects. Randy Walker, Sean Delacroix, son of the former mayor, Matthew Price, son of the county sheriff. The room sank into heavy silence. Only the faint hum of the air conditioner and my rapid breathing remained. Briggs spoke slowly. Linda was drugged after her late-night shift at Walker Diner. She was lured to Randy's hunting cabin. The assault lasted over 3 hours. She filed charges the next day, but within 3 weeks, the case was closed. No arrests, no prosecution. Ben whispered, his face pale. "And the baby is—" "Me," I cut in, my voice hoarse. Everything around me warped. A wave of nausea surged, and I struggled not to vomit right there. Briggs continued, his words like nails being driven into a coffin. Randy's family had enough power to bend everything. The sheriff was Matthew's father. The mayor was Sean's father. The hospital board was under indirect pressure from the Walkers. Linda was forced to disappear after giving birth under a mutual protection agreement. And the baby was conveniently placed into Richard Walker's care. A perfect cover-up, I whispered. Did my adoptive father know? Briggs stared at me seriously. He knew everything, but he chose to adopt you perhaps out of guilt or as a way to redeem the crime his brother committed. But he never had the courage to tell you. My whole body burned, then turned cold. Sweat drenched my back. Ben gripped my shoulder. "Ethan, are you okay?" No, I was not okay. My entire life, the perfect facade I had lived under, was built on the foundation of a monstrous crime that the whole town conspired to cover up. I shot up from my chair, my fists clenched tight. "We have to do something. He can't keep living free like this." Briggs nodded calmly. "I know someone who can help. This case is big enough to go beyond the county level. If you're ready to go all in, I can connect you with the Ohio State Attorney's Office." I growled. "Do it. I'm not afraid." That night, I sat alone in my pitch-black apartment. Outside, Columbus sparkled under the city lights, as if nothing had happened. My phone buzzed softly. A text from Claire. "I'm here if you need me." I didn't reply. I couldn't pull Claire into this filthy black hole. Not yet. But I swore to myself I would end the evil they started, even if I had to drag the entire Walker family into hell. The plan to bring the truth into the light began on a Saturday in May. I knew a simple press conference or a routine lawsuit wouldn't be enough to expose a system that had buried this crime for nearly 3 decades. We needed a shockwave, something so public, so undeniable, that the guilty wouldn't have time to react, and most importantly, I needed Linda. The problem was, she was still avoiding me. "She's terrified, Ethan," Ben said. "Those men destroyed her life. Coming forward means facing the very monsters who buried her past. But if she doesn't stand up now, then everything she's suffered would mean nothing," I said, through clenched teeth. "I have to see her. One last time." I returned to her small house in Madison County. Before knocking, I took a deep breath, as if preparing for battle. Linda opened the door, her face paling when she saw me. This time, I didn't let her shut it. "Please, just a few minutes. I'm your son." She froze. Her lips trembled, her eyes swirling within a turmoil. Finally, she opened the door. Inside. The house was modest, a few old photographs, a small bookshelf, and the faint scent of herbal tea. We sat across from each other in tense silence. I spoke first. "I know everything now. Mom—" She flinched. The word Mom startled her. A tear rolled down her cheek. "I thought I had buried it all," she whispered. "I didn't want to drag you into that hell. They're powerful. Ethan." I locked eyes with her, my voice firm. "I've been living in hell for 28 years without knowing it, but I won't let them keep getting away with it." She broke into sobs, her shoulders shaking. "You're the only good thing I had left after everything. I just wanted you to live peacefully, without that scar." I took her hand, feeling its warmth, for the first time, a warmth I had yearned for all my life. "But I need the truth. Not just for me, for you too." Linda buried her face in her hands, crying. After a few minutes, she looked up, her voice shaky but determined. "Then, what do you plan to do?" We spent the next 3 weeks planning meticulously. I leveraged my real estate connections to organize a grand charity gala for Riverside Hospital, the place where all the horror began. Sponsored by Walker Properties, of course. Every member of the Walker family and all the powerful figures from the past would be in attendance. A perfect stage. Ben coordinated with Briggs, who had now established contact with the Ohio State Attorney's Office to gather ironclad evidence copies of buried files, old witnesses, Carol, the nurse's testimony, administrative records that had been hidden for years. Everything was ready. The climax would play out in front of the very power structure that had once silenced her. On Friday night, the Renaissance Columbus Hotel gleamed under the chandelier lights. Guests arrived in elegant tuxedos and gowns, laughter and polite chatter filling the air. I stood in a corner, scanning the familiar faces: my adoptive father Richard with Grandma on his arm, Sean Delacroix, now a wealthy real estate developer, Matthew Price, now a federal judge, and, of course, Randy, wearing a deep blue suit, beer belly stretching the fabric, his face flushed from bourbon. He spotted me and smirked. "Well, Ethan," trying to win Daddy's favor with this grand charity gala, I smiled faintly. "No. Tonight's about the truth, Uncle." His face tightened, but before he could respond, the stage lights flared. The MC announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest who wishes to say a few words." The spotlight swung toward the main entrance. Linda entered, in a simple grey dress. She walked steadily down the red carpet, eyes locked on the Walker family. The entire hall erupted into shocked whispers, like a hive of angry bees. My father turned pale. Grandma gripped her chair. Randy froze like he'd been struck by lightning. Linda took the microphone. Her voice trembled at first, but each word sharpened as she spoke. "I am Linda Parker, 28 years ago. I was gang-raped by 3 men in this room. I became pregnant. I was silenced, erased from this town. But the child I bore is Ethan Walker. And tonight, my truth will no longer be buried." Chaos exploded. Shouts of denial. Panic rippled from Randy's table. At that moment, Briggs and agents from the Ohio State Attorney's Office entered from the rear, pulling out arrest warrants. Randy jumped up, screaming, "This is insanity, lies." An agent slammed a thick file onto the table. "We have full witness testimonies. tampered records, and evidence of bribery. Randy Walker, Sean Delacroix, Matthew Price, you are under arrest for rape, abuse of power, destruction of evidence, and systemic judicial fraud. The hall erupted. Screams, camera flashes, reporters invited secretly by Ben swarmed like vultures. Amidst the chaos, I turned to Linda. For the first time, she looked at me, tears filling her eyes, but pride radiating from her face. "Thank you," she whispered. I squeezed her hand, clutching the bond I had searched for all my life. But I knew this wasn't over. Tomorrow. The legal war would only just begin. 3 months after the explosive night at the Renaissance Columbus, the preliminary federal trial officially began at the Ohio District Court. The name Walker was everywhere but no longer praised with glamorous headlines. Now it was plastered across national media with blazing titles: Walker Empire Crumbles, 30-year-old gang rape cover-up exposed, 3 power families fall. Randy Walker, mayor's son, and federal judge indicted. I entered the courtroom wearing a simple grey suit. Linda walked beside me, her hand trembling slightly, but her gaze firm. Ben and Briggs sat in the front row on the prosecution's side. Across the aisle, Randy sat in handcuffs, his face pale after 90 days in custody. Sean Delacroix and Matthew Price sat beside him, stripped of the arrogance they once carried. Their defense attorneys pulled every legal maneuver possible, challenging old evidence, questioning witness credibility, but the Ohio State Attorney's Office came fully armed with medical records, independent investigations, Carol Jenkins's new testimony, statements from former hospital staff, and long-hidden bribery records. The climax came when Linda took the stand. The courtroom fell silent as she recounted, with a trembling but unwavering voice, what had happened that night publicly, for the first time after nearly 30 years. When she said, "They forced me into silence, but I will not be silent anymore." It felt like decades of weight finally lifted from her shoulders. Days later, Randy collapsed as he heard his sentence: 25 years in prison for rape, kidnapping, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. Sean and Matthew received 18 and 22 years, respectively, for their roles. There was no escaping now. The press dubbed it House of Cards meets True Crime Ohio. As for my adoptive father, Richard Walker, he faced no criminal charges, having not directly participated in the crime, but his reputation and career were shattered. All assets under Walker Properties were frozen under financial investigation. He quietly retreated to an old farm outside Akron, severing ties with the rest of the family. 3 months after the final verdict. Linda and I stood before a new community center site on the outskirts of Columbus. It was being built with settlement money Linda received from a civil suit following the criminal trial. "I'm still not used to being called Mom," Linda said softly, a shy smile on her face. "Me neither." I chuckled, squeezing her hand. "But at least now we can finally call each other that without hiding." She looked at me, eyes brimming with tears. "You are stronger than anyone I've ever known. Ethan." I held her shoulders firmly. "No, we're strong. Both of us survived that nightmare together." That night, I received a message from Claire, who had quietly followed my journey from a distance while we took space during the scandal. "If you're ready to talk, I'm still here." For the first time in months, I replied, "I'm ready." I stepped out onto my apartment balcony, gazing up at the quiet Columbus night sky. The ghosts of the past had been dragged into the light. The child born from a monstrous crime once burdened by shame and lies could now walk forward with his head held high, free from the weight of secrets he never created. And above all, I finally knew who I was.